I'm Steve Gilman, and this is Brand Story, where we help you build stronger, more sustainable brands by sharing insightful conversations with brand leaders, marketers, and professional storytellers. My guest today is Joseph McBee.
The modalities and the platforms for learning are constantly changing. The key is, what's at the base of that? Do you have a learning culture? Do you have a passion for people development?
Joseph is a senior instructional designer and e-learning specialist at Canon Business Process Services. He's been a senior trainer and has worked in training and development for over 25 years. He's also won National Trainer of the Year at Canon more times than I could count. And Joseph, welcome to Brand Story.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here. I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while now, and I love your content and how generous you are with sharing things about learning. And you are a voracious reader, and I can tell you're very passionate about learning. So it's going to be really fun to talk to you today.
Yeah, true. I always have been. You know, a lot of people, they kind of grow into reading and enjoying books. I don't remember a time when I haven't been into that.
That's great. Well, you landed in the right field for someone that likes to learn as much as you do. So just so that people have some idea what you actually do every day, because I think it's really fun to have someone that's in learning and development on the podcast because, you know, we talk about all the different aspects that help you build a great brand. And quite frankly, learning and development in organizations is sometimes undervalued. So, you know, I think it's really important to talk about it because if people aren't continually learning, oftentimes the organization isn't improving, which I know you probably agree with.
Yeah, I do. I know you get no argument from me there.
Yeah. So what does an instructional designer do? What's your average day look like?
Well, that's a great question. I do a lot. One of the best things about my job is it feeds my own personal desire for learning, and that I'm constantly having to learn new things. But what my job is, I take subject matter experts that we have within the company, taking their knowledge, their experience, all that stuff, and then trying to aggregate that, consolidate it, organize it in such a way that other people can understand it, and then creating the best modalities for them to gain that knowledge and experience, and then apply it to the way that they do their job. So that's can be anything from designing an e-learning course to creating micro-learning assets to creating full development programs. You know, one of the programs I developed is a 9-month-long program.
Wow.
With multiple projects and courses and meetings and subject matter experts and coaching sessions for some of our top performers. So it's a great job. I love it.
What a cool job. And also that's a lot. So you're part interviewer, part investigator, and part teacher.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is really cool. How has it changed over the years? You've been doing this a long time. Has technology, and especially since COVID, do you see a real rise in doing more things, you know, in a hybrid way, online, fully remote? Has it changed the way you do your job?
Absolutely. And in fact, not just the pandemic, which of course created some major changes, but also, like you mentioned, the technology. You know, as technology advances, you know, doing virtual meetings, when I first started out in training and development, there was no such thing.
Yeah, no, right.
As a virtual meeting. I mean, everything was live. I traveled a lot. People came to us in our offices to do courses. There was nothing online. And then, you know, now the vast majority of our learning is done online with our employees. And what that's done is it's kind of interesting because it's enabled us to doing virtual and in-person meetings have become much more, I want to say, elite and exclusive and targeted. And so the technology advances has actually allowed us to improve our in-person and virtual meetings.
I bet, because you're able to customize more to where messages don't have to be so general. Because I remember the days of learning and development in organizations when everything was in a conference room.
Exactly. And we hardly ever do that anymore.
And I think in those days, you tend to generalize more because you have a spread of skills, and then it becomes very cumbersome and time consuming to break into smaller groups that are more specialized.
Yes. And, one of the great things about some of the virtual platforms that we use, like Microsoft Teams, is it enables us to do breakout sessions, and we can do whiteboarding, and you can get incredibly creative even with a virtual tool.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's much more collaborative now than it used to be.
Right.
So I bet it's harder to design too because you're customizing it more.
It is. It is. But, I enjoy the challenge of that. And it's also interesting because you'll design something on paper and it looks really great on paper. And then you pilot it and it just doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I thought this was a great idea, but in real life, this doesn't look like a great idea.
Yeah. I've found that anyone that's in learning and development is really good at it. It tends to be highly empathic because it's a feedback loop. You're trying to train people and get them to learn, and things flop. Some training just doesn't take, So what do you do in those situations?
That's a great question. I appreciate you saying empathic. That is one of the keys, is the ability to connect with your learner. There's a couple of major, like your two primary rules. Number one, it's a sin to bore the learner. You don't bore them. They have to be excited about it. They have to be invested. They have to be connected. And that means, number two, it's not about you. It's about the learner.
Yeah.
So, and so many instructional designers, and I do it too, we have a tendency to get really excited about something, and it's fascinating to us, but can we create the learning in such a way that somebody else is going to get excited about it? And if I'm not putting them first, I'm not going to be able to accomplish that.
Man, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because there's a real parallel between, learning and development and marketing. And we do marketing. But honestly, anytime marketing is about you and your benefits and how cool you are and how great your company is and blah, 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 no one cares. It has to be about them and what they care about. It has to be in their language. It has to be about what they feel and what connects with them. So, a lot of great marketing tends to have an educational component. It tends to try to bring someone that they don't know. And the empathy of it, of making it not about you, is key to that kind of success.
Yeah. I think of it a lot. I love movies and novels and stories and stuff like that. And so I think in terms of a lot about the hero and the guide. In learning as well as in marketing, I believe you are not the hero. You're the guide. The learner, or the buyer, if you will, they are the hero of the story. So as soon as you make it about you, they're not interested.
Yeah, it's done. It's so boring to have a company, whether they're trying to teach you something or engage you in a way that you might want to buy from them. Talking about yourself is boring, but you're sharing. Yeah, I've noticed that about you online. You're a great storyteller, and it's because you've spent so much time with stories. So I think that's one of the reasons I connected with your post on LinkedIn. By the way, anyone listening that doesn't follow Joseph on LinkedIn, do yourself a favor and do it, because his posts are really personal. They're entertaining. They're engaging. They tell good stories. And I of course studied marketing and have degrees and all that, but I was also a theater director.
All right.
Yeah. So for me, story arcs and movies and character development and all those things come in handy more than anything in my career.
Yeah, I'm a theater person as well.
Oh, good for you. That's so cool. That's great.
I did a lot of theater, community theater, acting and directing, and yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sure that makes your training that much better because it is theater.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. It is in so many ways it's a performance, especially if you're facilitating something that you've done literally 100 times before.
Yeah, right.
And you have to come at it with this at level of energy, because this is the first time the people in your audience have seen this, even though it's your 100th time delivering it. So it has to be fresh and passionate every time.
That's so great. I mean, I bet people who go through your programs and learn from you, whether they know that's intentional, I bet they really appreciate it, because all of us have been through training where the person's heart wasn't into it.
Oh yeah.
And it's a show. Like any kind of, like when you're trying to communicate anything, someone to learn, change skills, learn new skills, expand their career. You have to entertain while you educate, you know? So I think that your background in theater, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool.
Yeah, it helps. It definitely helps.
I bet it does. Let's talk a little bit like we'll back out of the career stuff and just talk a little more generally and then come back into it, like how I got some questions about how organizations learn. But you're a lifelong learner. I can tell that from your content, talking to you. You know, you're so passionate. You've done a few posts where you're like, "Oh, I only read 6 books this month."
Yeah.
Which I'm like, "Man, okay. You beat yourself up for only 6, huh?"
Yeah.
So, you know, what's your philosophy around learning and where did it come from?
One of my favorite memories as a child, a lot of people, they don't remember when they learned to read. I literally remember the moment that the lines on a page kind of came together and made sense.
Wow.
And I remember sitting there looking at this and thinking, this is the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me. I'd always loved books, just in general, loved books. My dad used to love to tell the story of, there was a book that he read to me. It was, I don't remember what it was now, but it was some book, children's book, before I could read, that I had memorized to the point where I knew when to turn the page. And he used to do a show where he would invite friends over and have me read the book. And just basically, I would just had it, and they would follow along, looking over my shoulder, and I'm turning the page at exactly the right time. But it's just something that came to life for me at a very early age. And just over the years, I began to think, I can learn anything I want. I can accomplish anything I want if I'm willing to put in the time and the effort to learn the concepts, the language, the principles, and put them into practice. And it's worth it. And so it just really came alive to me at a very young age.
That's amazing. I mean, so how do you think I think in organizations, there are individuals who are just motivated to learn. So I've always been a voracious reader, watching movies. You know, the University of Google or YouTube are amazing. If you really want to search for something and learn how to do it, there's tons of resources out there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you can go to a library and get an entire education.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I tell people that all the time. It's like a library card is free.
Yeah.
And you can learn anything you want for free, either online or in a library. And librarians are some of my personal heroes. I mean, the way they track down information, specific resources, I love it.
Yeah, and it's what I think so interesting is reading and being curious like that and seeking out, sources and trying to figure out your point of view as you're learning is a lot like travel. So I've talked to some guests about how, if you're going to be great at marketing or you're going to be great at communicating or getting people to learn, travel is a great way to do it because it gives you a different perspective on human beings and you have to have a lot of empathy to travel. But one of the things I always talk to them about is like, yeah, but when you can't travel, you can read, because it is like virtual travel, isn't it?
It really is. So many quotes, so many that you can't really even pinpoint a specific source, but where people talk about, the person who doesn't read only gets to live one life. But the person who reads can live thousands of lives.
So true, too.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that point of view. So how do you encourage people? Because I think it's a real struggle. People are busy. They have busy lives. Their jobs are demanding. And they need to keep learning, or at least try to develop a habit of continuous learning or a passion for it. How do you encourage people to do that? Because I think it's crucial to success.
In terms of reading, let's take specifically reading. I always encourage people to find one thing that they actually enjoy. One of the biggest problems is children are forced to read rather than falling in love with reading. We homeschooled our children, our 3 sons. And one of the things that we did is I tried to help them find something they loved to read and they wanted to read everything they could in that particular genre or subject. And then that expanded out. So start with something that you enjoy and go deep. And then you'll find that you'll begin to go wide. That deep interest will spark additional interest for you. And also just in conversations, having conversations with people who are leaders in their field, no matter what the field is. It doesn't even have to be something you're interested in. because those leadership principles and those success principles are universal. I was having a conversation with somebody recently who was an incredible salesperson. And I'm having this conversation with them, and I'm picking up all kinds, not necessarily about sales, but about success in anything that you do. And so then that sparks your interest. It's like, I need to know more about that. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, it fosters a sense of curiosity. You just stated the reason I started this podcast. I mean, I learn so much from my guests, and I get to meet incredible people from all these different walks of life and perspectives. And I get to dive into their story a little bit and get their perspective. And honestly, that's why I started this podcast. It wasn't like a business reason, like, oh, we'll use it to market ourselves. I think too many podcasts are just sales tools. But I just wanted to have, it was the pandemic, and I wanted to have these kind of one-on-one conversations. And I think, there's all this stuff out about podcasting or even writing, always niche down and become, super specialized. And I'm always telling people niche up a little bit. It's a rich world, and the more you know about different aspects of it, the more successful you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to go deep in some things, a few things. You got to master a few things. But what broader and wider you can go, the more variety and the more, like you're talking about, the more curious you can be. It's just a much richer experience, not only for learning, but just in life.
I agree. And I think I love what you said about, people trying to find something that they love or something that's easy for them to read because they really, truly enjoy it. And then don't judge what you're reading. Like, I've had friends that were super into graphic novels and comic books. And I'm like, good for you, because that kind of turns into something else. And if someone's into like trashy thriller novels, okay.
Right.
You don't have to be snooty about it and only read biographies. At least it's a gateway to being curious and learning about people that aren't like you. And I think anytime you're exposed to narratives, it makes you reflect on other people.
Agreed. And I don't judge, like you're saying, I don't judge anybody. If you're reading, fantastic. That's the key to me. I mean, considering the average American only reads a couple of books a year, if that. So somebody told me not too long ago, it's like, you read 6 books last month. I've only read 3 books this whole year so far. Like, good for you. You're already doing better than most people. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it beats the hell out of just scrolling on Instagram. Yeah. So for really busy, because I always think about this, like I've always been a voracious reader. I don't read like you. I can't do 6 books a month, but I'm always reading something, and I usually have something that's like more, instructional or business related or something I'm curious about. And then I always have like just a stupid novel. And that's my habit. I always have those 2 things going at once. But I don't know how you read 6 books in a month. I mad respect for that, Joseph.
I can't read less than 4 or 5 books at a time. I just can't. I've tried focusing in. I'm going to read only 1 book at a time. I just can't do it. I have to have 4 or 5. Or right now, I think I have like 8 going.
That's so cool. Yeah, I can manage 2 at a time. I don't think I could do 8. That's really, really cool, though. So for people that hear that and they're like, oh, man, I could never even do 2, or there's no way I can do 8, and they're busy and they're trying to grow their careers, there's knowledge there. Like, say they're a learning and development person, or they're a marketing person, or they're a brand person, or whatever their career is. There's all these related books and information they can read. How do they work it into their busy lives? How do they start?
Well, the first key is you have to prioritize it.
Yeah.
I mean, we always make time for the things that are most important to us. We always find a way. If it's important, we're going to figure out a way to make it happen. So a better question to start with, I think, is why is this not important to me?
That's great. I love that.
And that's not a judgment question. It's not a critical question. It's just you need to determine what your priorities are. Because we all wrestle with those, I should do this or I should do that. But ultimately, if the desire is not there, you're just not going to. So quit feeling guilty about it, first of all, and just ask yourself, okay, why is this not as big of a priority for me as I want it to be? And explore that a little bit. And then once you can figure that out, it's a simple matter of scheduling some time is always helpful. Make an appointment every day from this in this hour. I'm going to spend reading, or 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever works for you. And lower the activation energy to get started. You know, if your book is in another room where you never see it, chances are, very slim you're ever going to actually pick that thing up. So you have it right next to you, where if you have a few moments, it's silly not to just pick up the book and read. And the biggest thing for me, is I tell people all the time, is all those times that you're spending picking up your phone, pick up a book instead.
Yeah, even if you did it 20% of the time. By the way, I love what you said of lower the activation energy of what you're wanting to do. Because you're right, if you lay books around and it's something you can pick up casually, I think people think, oh, I have to sit down and read for 2 hours, or I have to sit down and read for an hour. And maybe that comes from being forced to read in school,
Yeah, definitely.
or having to like cram for exams. But like reading for pleasure or reading for knowledge can be a lot of fun. And you don't have to, you can do it for 15 minutes and then set it down and come back to it later.
Absolutely. And if you look at like if you track the time you spend on your phone, and it can show you how many hours you've been, how many times you've picked it up, how many times you've looked at it. I mean, I just read a statistic the other day. The average person picks up their phone or engages with their phone it's like 4,000 times a day or something. I mean, it's insane how much time we spend. And again, no judgment, no guilt there. But like you said, 20% of that time, pick up a book instead. You're going to start knocking them off. You're going to start finishing those books.
I agree. Unless they're using their phone as an e-reader, then that's great. If they've got the Kindle app on their phone and that's how they want to read, more power to you.
Agreed.
What's your perspective on like a lot of people, and I'm sure you run into this in being a learning specialist and trying to get people to learn, is some people learn better by watching a video and some people learn better by reading. So there's a lot of different learning styles, I think. How do you accommodate or encourage people with different learning styles to just figure out, how to move forward? And how do you accommodate that in an organization?
Well, in a lot of ways, learning styles are preferences. So if it's a preference, that's one thing. And if you can find the learning in your preferred modality, good for you. The danger comes when it becomes a requirement. I will not learn if I don't get it in this package.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's just resistance.
It's not the way life works, right? I mean, if we're determined to learn something, we'll take it in whatever package it comes in, because it's going to help us accomplish our goals. And adult learners, we all come to learning to solve problems, and that's the whole reason we're learning something, whether it's personal or professional or whatever. We need knowledge to fix something, to change something, to accomplish something, to solve some problem. So if we understand what that problem is that we're trying to solve, the package it comes in doesn't matter. We're going to get what we need.
That's really well said. And, I think even me personally, I read consistently. I've always been, I think I've been reading since the moment I could. I loved it and just did it. All kinds of different things, stories, plays, novels, instructional stuff. But, with YouTube and the availability of things like TED Talks, where you can listen to an expert talk about something, or podcasts where you can just listen, hopefully people will listen to this and get encouraged to learn. I think there's so many different ways we can learn that I honestly always advocate for mixing it up and trying to combine a couple of these ways.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting. Some things certainly work better in certain formats. Like you mentioned, TED Talks. I mean, we're talking about somebody who's a true expert that has spent years, sometimes decades, learning what they know, and they're going to encapsulate some of the most important things for you in 5 minutes. Well, hey, that's an incredible.
Why would you not want that?
Incredible tool, right? Why would you not avail yourself to that? Exactly. So there's certainly something to be said about the effectiveness of what it, and depends also on time. If I need to know, I want to learn something fast. So I don't want to read an entire book for something that I only need this much of. You know what I'm saying?
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, let me get a TED Talk. Let me get a podcast. Let me get a tip sheet. I'll get what I need and I can move on.
That's a great perspective. So, as such a voracious reader, do you do audiobooks too? What are your preferences in all this different media that we're offered to learn?
I personally prefer a physical book. I always have. I'm an unapologetic book sniffer. I like to
You
smell
like
a
the
book.
paper? Yeah.
Yeah, every time my family, whenever they give me a book, they'll literally sit there and watch me and like count down how long before I pick the book up to smell it. So it's just, I love just the physicality of it.
Yeah, I get it, you know?
I used to do audiobooks when I would commute. I work from home entirely now, but for many many years I commuted, and so I would do audiobooks that way. But there's just something to be said about having a physical book in your hand that you can touch, that you can mark up, that you can write in, that you can highlight. I just love it. There's no better thing for me.
That's so cool, man. Like, I love physical books for the same reason. And I'm glad there are so many people out there that are still passionate about them because you're right. They have a feel, they smell like paper and printing, and it's a wonderful thing. But what's interesting is I also have a Kindle that I love, and I tend to read like trashy novels on my Kindle. And if
Yeah.
I'm learning something, I want a book. It's really an interesting. I have no idea where that comes from, but that's how I'm built. And I've never been able to do audiobooks. Even if I have a long commute or a long drive, for some reason they just don't hold my attention. Because the person's reading to me and I read a lot faster than that. So I get really impatient, you know?
I can see that. I love to read out loud,
Wow, that's cool.
and I love to read to people. And when my sons were growing up, we did every night we did story time. And when they were little, it was small, short, kind of picture books. But as they got older, we started reading like Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim and the Chronicles of Narnia and The Hobbit and all different kinds of novels. And I would do all the voices for the different characters and stuff like that. Just part of that theater background.
That's definitely a theater background thing to do.
Yeah.
That's so cool though, because that part of storytelling is that it's so human. And when we read to each other, when we perform something, I think it energizes it and you connect on a level that just reading it or just getting it passively, it's such a different experience. So you and I could probably, evangelize about the powers of theater for another whole episode.
Yeah, I was just thinking, my mind was already started going down that very line about the energy and the connection with an audience, and there's nothing like it.
There really isn't. If anyone's listening and they don't see live theater, please do yourself a favor. It's an amazing experience, even if you think you don't have the patience or it's going to be dry. Just go. So, for people listening in organizations, there's the rise of AI. There's so many things going on with technology and learning, and you're right in the heart of it doing learning programs right now. What do you see in the future of learning right now and how organizations are trying to, get their employees to the next level and train top performers? Are things changing? Do you see a lot of change or what do you see going on?
I think I see a lot of change in culture.
Interesting.
Learning and development for many, many years has been the first thing to go when a company needs to cut costs. And we'll just get rid of the learning team. And that is less and less true these days. And now I've been blessed in that the company that I'm a part of and have been a part of for 25 years has always been a learning and development company. And they're very much dedicated to learning and development. So that's been good for me in my career. But not every company has been like that. But that's becoming more and more the case. And in addition, companies are seeing the value in a learning culture, especially with the new generations of workers that are coming in. Because I'm sure you've read the statistics and the studies that are showing that Gen Z and millennials and stuff like that, they will pass over more money in order to get more learning. So we're talking about younger generations who truly value learning and growth, which is super exciting for somebody like me to see them coming in with that attitude already is teach me everything you can. And companies that are smart are grabbing hold of that, and they're saying, we have a real opportunity here. And if we don't provide this for them, then they're gone. They're going to go find somebody who will, and more power to them. That's what they should do.
I think that's great. I've noticed that as well. And then also I think, if you're trying to build a great brand and you're not doing learning and development and you're not encouraging people to learn, part of learning and part of a culture of learning is the culture. So you get people who are curious, you get people who are learning, they tend to be more engaged, they tend to want to help others, they tend to have more empathy. Learning just overall, I think, improves your company culture, your brand, and how people experience it.
Absolutely. There are a lot of people talk about the technologies with AI and with virtual reality becoming more and more part of learning. And certainly that's something that has to be considered, but I really don't think that's the primary thing. I really don't think that's where your attention needs to be, because the modalities and the platforms for learning are constantly changing. The key is what's at the base of that. Do you have a learning culture? Do you have a passion for people development? Because I can have all the fancy tools in the world, and without the passion for developing my people, those tools are useless.
Yeah, man, that's hallelujah. Because honestly, like learning is such a human thing.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
The technology is just bells and whistles or delivery systems. And quite frankly, if you can just engage someone in getting them to want to learn and make it a habit and make it something that everyone knows is supported, that's half the battle.
Absolutely. And that comes from that a true desire to see people grow to their fullest potential. And you got to connect with them, understand what is it that you're looking to get, where is it that you want to go, what's your vision, for your career, and then helping guide them and coach them and develop them along that path, and they'll stick around longer.
Absolutely. I was just thinking while you were saying that, I was just thinking like that's a differentiator, like for a workplace, because that's about people investing in you and believing in you and making a space for you to improve instead of, hey, just do your work and we don't really care about you. It shows a lot of caring and a lot of like investment.
Yep. Again, the hero and the guide all over again.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Employees are your heroes. Your employees are your heroes.
That is a great point, man. By the way, this conversation has been an absolute blast. I have had so much fun talking to you today.
Oh yeah, same here. I've really enjoyed it.
So I have a couple more questions. I just have a couple parting questions. And I really hope anyone listening to this, one, will follow you on LinkedIn. So please, we'll have on the landing page for the site, we'll have your LinkedIn, ability to just click through and follow you. Because I think Joseph's passion for learning comes through very loud and clear. And that's that's why I wanted to have you on. I think like you have such a really honest passion for this stuff. It's really infectious. Like I want to go read now. Like as soon as we get off, I feel like I need to go get like 4 books.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. So just a couple closing questions, then I'll let you go because I know you have a lot to do today too. What's something about your work that no one ever asks that you've always wanted to be like, hey, this is like a weird thing or a cool thing about learning and development?
Oh wow, what a great question. I love that question. It's funny. People sometimes when they ask, what do you do, and I tell them I'm an instructional designer, their eyes immediately like kind of glaze over. It's like this is going to be boring. Whatever it is that you do, it's got to be boring. And the thing that I want people to know about what I do is it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And I firmly believe that what I do has an impact well beyond just facilitating a course or creating a course. Because what happens is, and I get really worked up about it when I think about it, is if I can help someone become better at what they do, if I can help someone develop in their personal and professional life, that not only helps them, it changes their families and it changes their communities. and it changes the people that they interact with. I often think of what I do as kind of the proverbial, pebble dropped in the pond, where the ripples go all the way out to the shore, kind of a thing. It's like that every piece of learning that I create is that pebble in somebody else's life, and that it just reverberates throughout. And so that's the reason I have a real passion for what I do, is because of the impact that I believe it has on people's lives.
Man, that's beautiful. And also, I think that's so true about people who help other people learn, because you never know the impact, and every once in a while you get a glimpse, like some people, it'll be lost on them. Some people will do it by rote, but there's the people that what you're teaching them really touches them, and they use it as a springboard into something else.
Yes.
And all of a sudden their career takes off, or they learned something that starts to be reflected in their personal life. And that must be truly satisfying when you get to see that.
Oh, it is. And you're right. Sometimes it is rare. You have to kind of trust that what you're doing is making that impact. And then every once in a while you get that gift of being able to see it actually happen. And it's just like, man, it's all worth it. All the hours, all the energy, all the efforts, totally worth it.
I mean, it's almost like, just being intentionally kind as you go through your daily life. You don't know how it's rippling, but, you can, have some faith that it is, So I honestly, I think people who teach and people who help people learn, it's an amazing calling, and it's such an important role in businesses and in lives and schools and everything.
Yeah, and I love the word that you use, the calling there.
It really is one, isn't it?
I think that's so true. I agree. I think many things are. I think even when people kind of fall into something, like, well, this is what I'm doing, and you put in the work and you put in the effort, it can become a calling.
Absolutely, it can. Yeah, you can. You fall in love with things, and I think people who are storytellers. What's interesting is that you're in learning development. I'm in brand and marketing. We're both just storytellers.
Absolutely.
We both love stories. We both love characters. We both love sharing that. We just share it in different mediums. So that's why I have so much fun talking to you. So what would you name this chapter of your life right now?
Wow. Another great question. I love these questions. So creative. This particular chapter, I think I would name mastery and exploration.
That's great.
Those are the two words that come to mind there. It's just, I always am striving to become the absolute best that I can possibly be at what I do, while simultaneously exploring all that I can, learning more, growing more, changing. The two feed each other.
Yeah, they do. What's so great is I have no idea what you're going to say to that question, but I follow you on LinkedIn, and your posts communicate that.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Yeah.
The combination of the different things you write about really do communicate those two things, which is why it's so much fun to follow you.
I love that. Thank you so much. That made my whole day.
Yeah, man, it's coming through. Keep it up. I love your content. So, okay, last question, and then I'll let you go. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
There are so many things that I would say.
Yeah, right?
I think I would say to my younger self, your life is not going to be what you expect. And that's okay. You're going to be okay. It's going to be great. It's not going to be what you think it is. And I think so many of us should give that advice to our younger selves. It's like, don't be disappointed with where you are. It's you're going to be okay.
I think that's incredible advice. So when you're young, sometimes you have this vision of how things are going to work out, and you miss. It's such a strange situation where you miss what's happening and what's great because you think it should be a different way.
Brenda Ullin, in her book, So You Want to Write, she talks about one of my biggest takeaways from that book was she talks about living in the destination. And when we're living in the destination, we're missing where we are. We're constantly thinking about where we're going next. It's like in this podcast, one of the things I've really been trying to do this whole time is just live right here. This is everything right now. connecting with you, spending this time talking. It's been a fantastic conversation. And I have not been thinking about, okay, what am I going to do for lunch after this is over? It's just,
Yeah, me either.
it's just in this moment, this is everything right now. And I love that concept of, am I living in my destination or am I living in the moment?
Man, I think that's probably one of the coolest things anyone's said on this podcast. I love that so much because, I've studied meditation. Being in the moment's incredibly important to me. It's something you're always trying to do. You're always reminding yourself to be present. And that's why I love this podcast, because when, I love trying to figure out what to talk to someone about, but when I'm doing it, there is nothing else going on except for me and you having this conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Great, man. You were a blast to talk to. I had so much fun. So thank you so much for being here. And for everyone listening, please follow Joseph. You won't be at all sorry you did. His content's amazing and he's an amazing person. So thank you again for being here, my friend.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Want to hear more inspiring stories? Subscribe on your preferred podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you like what we're doing, please rate, review, and share. It's the best way to support us. Thank you for listening to Brand Story.